Hey friends, how's it going? It's leowt here. Hoping you can hear me. I'm gonna just take a quick test on my phone because the last time I did one of these lives, no one could hear me, and I didn't know for 35 minutes. So, we're gonna just check on that real quick. Yeah, it seems like a good idea before I'm 45 minutes in. Yeah. Also, if you can't hear me, can you let me know? Because that would be cool. That would be super cool, as a matter of fact. Alright, I have volume. I have volume and 0 watchers, but that's okay because I don't need watchers. Who needs watchers? I'm just kidding. You guys will come on. It's all good. So, I have just a few minutes to make a live between guests here, and I had to do it because there's too much intersectional, overlapping oppression and hatred coming out as represented in our most recent mass shooting in American history, which was yesterday. So basically, for those of you who don't know, I'm not a news reporter. I don't pretend to know everything about what happened because I wasn't there. But I've been reading about the crime, and it would appear that our friend, who happens to be a straight white male of Christian heritage, um, decided that he was going to willingly murder 8 Asian women and had the intent to murder many more. So that's really cool. It's a really good time. And from my understanding of the situation, there's a lot of things that were going on actually. So this guy was a youth pastor's kid, so we know he was steeped in evangelicalism. He was heavily invested in purity culture, and he had access to guns, and those seem to be like a pretty big I don't know. There's a pretty big conglomerations of things to happen all at once, right? But I want to talk about the situation from a macro level. And go ahead and drop a comment, my watcher. Go ahead and drop a comment if you can hear me, just so we make sure. But there's a lot of things happening in this situation that led up to this point of mass murder. Because we're going to call it is mass murder, and it was a hate crime. Point blank and period. And at a time in America where anti Asian sentiments are already running so pervasively in our culture, thanks to racist leadership who stoked racism intentionally for the past 4 years, no mixing of words there. At a time when those tensions are already running high, it is absolutely absurd to me that the police would try to say that he had a bad day. Right? That is crazy talk. It's crazy talk, and it's bullshit. And it's tantamount to police, um, what is it, culpability in the situation, right? Because the person will not be punished on the level of if it was considered a hate crime, which has happened and happens all the time to crimes that happens and they're not classified as a hate crime. Cool. Glad we can agree that that happens. But so there's a couple things that are happening in this story that I really want to talk about, right? And these are the things that precipitated this occurrence. There's purity culture, there's evangelicalism, there's racism, there is phobia of sex workers while simultaneously demonizing sex workers, and there's rampant militant Christian nationalism. Okay, I'm gonna break these down and talk about them a little bit separately. But let's start with purity culture. For those of you who aren't aware, purity culture is a movement specifically within the evangelical church, but not at all. It's not at all dissimilar to kind of puritanical ideas that infiltrated America in its earliest settings. Right? I'm just gonna type a quick message here. All right. So it's not at all separate from puritanical influence in American society. It's a pretty well known fact that Americans are like generally uncomfortable with the topic of sex and sexuality. It's a fairly like internationally known concept, right? And that started with the early Puritan movements in the United States, and then that moved on into anti birth control, and it moved on to into abstinence only. There are so many moments where we can see this happening. It is like watching a car crash in history, not being able to look away, right? So, what happens is there is a belief within Christianity, specifically conservative evangelical Christianity, that basically you have to not have sex until you're married. It is purity and abstinence only. Purity and abstinence only. All right. And then the other case at play is that there is a toxic masculinity that's latent within purity culture. And what basically is being said in that moment is that like men can't control themselves. They are lust monsters, right? Which I personally think is diminishing of the ability of males to have like a positive presence in society, to be honest, because you're saying men cannot control themselves, and the way that that is being portrayed is this: women are blamed all the time for tempting men. When we make lists of how to avoid sexual assault, they're always geared at the female. Carry a whistle, don't walk home late at night, put your car keys between your fingers, don't wear clothes that are too revealing, watch your drink when you're at a party, go with a buddy system to the bathroom, all of these things. You notice what's not on that list of how to avoid sexual assault? Don't commit sexual assault, right? The onus is placed on the females. And this is accentuated in the idea of purity culture. Because women, and I understand this intimately because I want everyone here to understand that I was socialized as an evangelical female. So I can speak to this with direct lived experience. Women are told not to be a stumbling block to men. In youth group, you're not allowed to wear short shorts or spaghetti straps because you might arouse the men. Okay, well, first of all, you're responsible for your own arousing. I am not responsible for it. And second of all, you're responsible for how you handle it as a male. It is your responsibility to handle it. It is not the woman's responsibility. Or, let's be real, it can be other men. It's not a heterosexual bubble as much as people want to portray it as that. So in this idea of purity culture, you've got these women that are being blamed and these men that are being taught, basically, if you read between the subtext, that they're not accountable. But then this other weird thing happens where you're a teenager, you're at your point of like your peak sexuality, right? Or you're not the peak, but the beginning, right? So you've got a big influx of hormones coming in. And then they're like, nope, can't act on that. And then they take it one level further, Christians take it one level further, because not only can you not act on your sexual impulses, you cannot act on them alone, because that is immoral. And next level, perhaps the highest level, and what I believe to be the most damaging, at least in this situation, is just thinking about sex or just lusting is as if you have committed the act. The implications of this kind of thinking are huge, and I need you guys to track with me because this is a big contributing factor. Now, I am not saying that this young man, this terrorist, was not responsible. He was not a victim, and he was fully responsible. But the kind of thinking that led him to take this action is a fundamental belief that he was a sex addict. I kid you not, man. I've talked to so many male friends that were told that simply because they had sexual urges, that they were sex addicts. That's absurd. You're a teenager. You're going to think about sex. You're going to touch yourself. You're going to want to touch other people. That is being a teenager. That is sexual awakening. That is puberty. That is all of it. But in the evangelical and puritanical and purity culture mindset that is framed as an evil and as a failing, just to think about it is a sin. So this creates a massive gravity on something that's already happening. You pair that gravity, that understanding, that belief that you're a sex addict for having sexual feelings, then you pair that with the toxic masculinity that is taught in purity culture, right? Which is women don't be a stumbling block to men, right? So you have these things happening within the church. Then outside of the church, you have a culture that is patriarchal and historically masculine centric, right? Men are valued in different ways in society. They're paid better, they're held to different standards, they're treated differently. If you don't believe me, I have no time for you because I've lived as both a male and a female, and I've seen the interplay of how these come out. So not only is this person living in purity culture, but this person is living in a toxically masculine patriarchal environment. And in this environment that we see happening in the secular realm of America, first of all, Asians are being demonized, literally calling coronavirus the Kung flu. Literally in like American society, in the world of pornography in general, Asian women are fetishized, right? Highly fetishized, right? There's something exotic and other, and they're geishas and this or that, whatever. Then yet another layer of racism is added on there, where Asians are considered to be the good minority, right? Because I don't know, is it because their skin's lighter? Is it because they're supposedly like dry cleaners, violinists, and mathematicians? Like, I don't know why, but we've got this cultural connotation that Asians are the good minority. And so you pair all of these things together, right? To where Asians, especially Asian women, are fetishized. And it's an understanding, basically, that, this young man is a sex addict, right? And he lives in a nation that is just seeping with Christian nationalism, right? So Christian nationalism being the idea that Christianity is the basis of our country, and nationalism meaning America and nothing else. Get out if you're not a part of our borders. And then this young man is brought up in a culture where, aggressive militant gun ownership is not only encouraged, it's actually worshipped. It's worshipped, right, by this holy trinity of God, guns, and the Bible, right? And this is an American phenomenon that's happening. So all of these things are happening on a daily basis. They literally lead this young man, this mass murderer, this violent criminal, to go out and commit mass murder using a gun to target a racial minority who has been fetishized and vilified in American society. Christian nationalism and purity culture and evangelicalism and toxic masculinity are holding hands. In this one. And it's not okay. I've been reading a lot of queer theory lately, a lot of black feminism and womanist writing, and the main idea between these overarching ideas is this. Queer theory, not really necessarily about gender and orientation, but queer theory, much like black feminism and womanism, is about seeing areas of intersectional marginalization, right? And so in this case, Asian women are intersectionally marginalized because they're women and they're Asian. And in this case, they were sex workers, because we all love to blame the sex workers because surely they're of a lower class because they do sex work. Except for everybody wants what they've got. So who's the onus really on? So these women that were murdered were living under intersectional areas of marginalization. And with those intersectional areas of marginalization, you also have intersections of oppression. And no one of these things is solely responsible for what happened, but all of these things are responsible for what happened. And that would be the idea behind black feminism and womanism and queer theory, is that these intersectional areas of oppression created the petri dish for which a mass murder could occur. And now, because of the current American climate and because of the society we have in America right now, people are not calling it what it is. There's literally a white man who was a policeman standing up and saying he had a bad day. That, my friends, is white supremacy, is racism, is xenophobia. It is apologetics for toxic masculinity, and it is not okay. All of these things are at play, and all of our liberation is bound up together in the demolishing of all of these systems. We cannot move forward with the system as it is right now. We cannot simply stop racism without stopping transphobia. We cannot stop transphobia without stopping xenophobia. We cannot stop any one of these things because they are all dependent on the same system. And frankly, all of these areas of intersection of oppression loop back to capitalism. That'll be in a whole nother video. But my point is that toxic masculinity, purity culture, Christian nationalism, racism, all of these things combined to create the environment where a young white man could go and commit mass murder, and we're going to say he had a bad day. That, my friends, is absolutely unacceptable, and we must do better. If you are any type of marginalized, you must band together to combat anti-Asian hate crimes. You must band together to fight transphobia. You must band together to stand up to Christian nationalism, to stand up to the patriarchy, and to say, nope. We must do better. And the way that we do better is by realizing that our liberation is bound up together. There is no individual way forward. But if we can come together as communities of marginalized people, we can change things. We must do better. Thank you so much for watching. I would love to hear any and all of your comments. There are so many more. Oh my goodness, colonialism and imperialism, Natalie. We didn't even really get there. But there are these so many overlapping systems. And this is the part I like about queer theology and women and black feminism and womanism, as that they do not look at one while forsaking the other. They must all be together. Even with queer theory, you cannot simply look at one's gender orientation as their sole part of marginalization, because it all goes together. And every one of those makes someone more vulnerable to systemic violence. And then the more intersections you have, the more vulnerable you are. We must do better. We must demand that our leadership do better. And we must publicly speak out against xenophobia, racism, homophobia, transphobia, and elitism. That is the only way forward. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like this, please share this, or don't do anything with it, but please listen to this and let it inspire some sort of change in you, because we must do better.